And we read this in Luke chapter 7. We're going to start in verse 36. One of the Pharisees asked him, that's being Jesus, to eat with him. And he went to the Pharisee's house and took place at the table. Jesus, he took his place at the table. He had the place of honor at this table. And behold, a woman of the city, who was a sinner, when she learned that he, being Jesus, was reclining at the table in the Pharisee's house, brought an alabaster flask of ointment. And standing behind him at his feet, weeping, she began to wet his feet with her tears, and wiped with the hair of her head, and kissed his feet, and anointed him with the ointment. Now, when the Pharisee who had invited him saw this, he said to himself, if this man were a prophet, he would have known who and what sort of woman this is who is touching him, for she is a sinner. Jesus, answering him, said to him, Simon, I have something to say to you. And he answered, well, say it, teacher. A certain moneylender had two debtors. One owed 500 denarii and the other 50. When they could not pay, he canceled the debt of both. Now, which of them will love him more? Simon answered, well, the one, I suppose, for whom he canceled the larger debt. And Jesus said to him, you have judged rightly. Then turning toward the woman, he said to Simon, do you see this woman? I entered your house. You gave me no water for my feet, but she has wet my feet with her tears and wiped them with her hair. You gave me no kiss, but from the time I came in, she has not stopped to kiss my feet. You did not anoint my head with oil, but she has anointed my feet with ointment. Therefore, I tell you, her sins, which are many, are forgiven, for she loved much. But he who is forgiven little loves little. But he said to her, your sins are forgiven. Then those who were at the table with him began to say among themselves, who is this who can even forgive sins? And he said to the woman, your faith has saved you. Go in peace. And there's a lot of stuff happening here, and we can really identify with this woman, because this woman is every single one of us in this room. This woman is us. One of the things is, you think it's like, well, how did this woman have access to Jesus? He's at the Pharisee's house, but how did this woman have access? In that day, the Pharisees, or the rich people, Pharisees were the upper middle class. Well, they had a house, and they had a room where they had their banquets at. Just adjacent to that room was a courtyard. In that courtyard, people can come, anybody could come, and they could listen to what's being said at the table. So she had access. Everybody had access to the courtyard, so she had access to Jesus through the courtyard. And then we look at Simon. One, he was a Pharisee. And we learned a couple weeks ago with Nicodemus. Pharisees are upper middle class. They look at the law, salvation through the law. They're very legalistic. They're like, you have to do X, Y, and Z to get God's favor. If you don't do X, Y, and Z, you do not receive God's favor. So that's kind of the mentality that they had. The Pharisees really looked down upon everybody. They looked down their noses big time at the whole population. And they were very legalistic. And, some people say, well, Simon invited Jesus to trap him. Some people will say that. But the thing is, he calls him teacher or rabbi. So he didn't come to trap him. More than likely, Simon was this kind of guy. He was a Pharisee. He was in the upper middle class. And he was kind of like that name dropper person. Oh, I ran into some celebrity here or some celebrity there. What he did was, people who had all this popularity, he would invite to his house. And so Jesus had this popularity. A lot of these people were following him. So he's like, oh, Jesus, come to my house and eat. So he can be like, oh, all these people following Jesus? Yeah, I don't know. I invited him over to my house. He came to my house. He was kind of like put those celebrities on a mantle, just kind of like the name dropper. It's like, oh yeah, I hung out with him. So he wasn't really trapping him. He just wanted the prestige of having Jesus in his house. See, the other person in this drama is the woman. And like I said, we all can identify with this woman. She had a reputation throughout the whole town. She was had the worst reputation. More than likely, she was a prostitute. And the passage says twice that she was a sinner. The writer, Luke, said, and a woman came and she was a sinner. And then Simon called her a sinner. And you know, you look at that word sin and sinner, it becomes very dumbed down and dull in our society, doesn't it? It's one of those Christian words that has lost its true meaning and true impact on people's lives. The word here is Greek hamaratopoulos. And it means this: deviate from a path of virtue. Or it means utterly wicked. Utterly wicked. Detestable. Sin. Utterly detestable. Utterly wicked. Unvirtuous. That's what this woman was. That's what we are. Every single one of us. We're sinners. We're unvirtuous. We're utterly detestable. But it's only by the grace of God that what he did on the cross, that when Jesus looks at us, that he does not see wickedness. That he forgives and offers that forgiveness. And we are not utterly detestable or wicked anymore. And we can identify that because we are all in the same boat as this woman. And she came in and she stood behind Jesus. Jesus was reclining at the table, and how that was playing out, they don't sit at tables and chairs, but they recline on their left side at the table, and their feet are hanging outward. So when the woman comes, she's standing at the end of Jesus, and Jesus is reclining. They eat with their right hand. The place of honor, Simon would have been right behind Jesus. So when Jesus would have said, Simon, I have something to say to you, he was right there. It was right there. Does that make sense? Yeah. Jesus, or this woman, when she started crying and weeping, well, she was standing, and her tears were hitting Jesus' feet. And, you know, they wore sandals. And when we wear sandals, I mean, we have cement, and we have sidewalks, and we have grass and everything. It was all dirt. You know, his feet were kind of nasty. And as the tears flowed from her face, off of her face, onto his feet, as she's standing there, all these mud streaks started happening on Jesus' feet. So she undoes her hair and she kneels down and she starts to kiss. And she's crying and she's starting to kiss his feet. And then she gets the anointment and she starts pouring it on his feet and kissing. And the actual language here, she does not stop doing this throughout this whole account. She doesn't stop doing it until she's dismissed by Jesus. So throughout this whole interaction with Simon and everybody else, she's sitting there, she's crying, she's wiping, she's kissing, she's pouring, she's crying, she's wiping, she's pouring, she's kissing. Throughout the whole account. Throughout this whole account. And she's mourning. And she's mourning. She lets her hair down. In the Hebrew culture, if your hair's all tattered and all messed up, it means that you're mourning. And she was mourning. Mourning for what? She was mourning for her sin. Her being utterly wicked. Jesus said at the Sermon on the Mount, he says, blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. And he's talking